Hello, my name's Richard Harrison, and I'm an ELT author and a publisher based here in Muscat and also in the UK. And today I'm going to be talking about critical thinking skills and how we can introduce critical thinking into the language classroom. But first of all, I just want to put it within the context of 21st century skills. So let me try and share my PowerPoint. Yes, and we'll go straight on to a definition of 21st century skills. The 12 abilities students need to succeed in the age of the internet. And I think we can all agree that we're very much in the age of the internet and have been for the last 10, 20 or more years. And we can classify these skills into learning skills, literacy skills, and life skills. And critical thinking is there, one of the learning skills. And then we also have information, media, and technology literacy. And on the right, the life skills, sometimes referred to as flips, 5 life skills there. I think it's generally agreed that critical thinking is one of the most important of these 21st century skills. So what I'm trying to do is to look at, first of all, what is critical thinking, and what are the different ways that we can introduce it into our language classrooms. So first of all, critical thinking it's a type of thinking, along with everyday thinking, scientific thinking, creative thinking, abstract thinking, and so on. Everyday thinking is the kind of random thinking we normally do when random thoughts float into our minds, rather like clouds. So maybe something like, what am I going to have for dinner? Did I remember to feed the cat? I must fix that broken pipe, and so on. Critical thinking, on the other hand, is very much conscious thinking. So you're aware that you are thinking, you're trying to come to a decision. So it is voluntary. It's reflective, meaning it takes place over a period of time, and it's a deep kind of thinking. And it's reasonable. It's based on reason, and using reason to try to come to a decision about what to believe or what to do. It's an integral part of academic life. So everything that students are involved in at university or college or school, for that matter, involves critical thinking. So if they're writing an essay or reading a textbook, looking at data, analyzing data, taking part in a discussion, all of that involves critical thinking. Another aspect about it is that it encourages skepticism and doubt. Now, skepticism and doubt are good things, I think. They're not the same as being negative or being cynical about something. It's good because it leads to asking questions. And I think here we're right at the very core of critical thinking. Asking questions, the ability to ask questions, not just factual questions, but questions that are difficult or searching or probing or inconvenient, sometimes in the past, even dangerous questions. What's the opposite of thinking critically? Well, basically it's non-thinking or accepting conventional wisdom. And this is what we do most of the time. We accept conventional wisdom. But throughout history, people have questioned the conventional wisdom. For example, the earth is flat. People started to question that. The continents cannot move. They were always in this position. Again, these have been questioned and disproved. And we can go on and on. The earth was the center of the universe, and this was conventional. In fact, it was dangerous to say the opposite. So asking questions like this has led to advances in knowledge, basically. So in all of these fields, they all depend on people asking questions. And because I'm based in the Arab world, I like to point out to students that from the 8th century to the 13th century, these critical thinkers who were asking questions about these areas were in fact Arab and Persian scholars for the most part. So how can we promote thinking that is, I like to use this image of a diamond, that's clear, precise, sharp, logical, systematic, reflective, and analytical, rather than the kind of woolly thinking that we are often capable of, unless, I would argue, unless we're trained to think in this particular way. So here are some suggestions of how we can introduce critical thinking, how we can get students to think in this way. So first of all, get students to think about their thinking. This is called metacognition. Introduce a critical thinking syllabus into your courses, and introduce critical thinking activities into the language classroom. So I'll be looking at each of these and giving examples. Let's start off with thinking about thinking. I've taken this from my book, Framework. So thinking about thinking, in this diagram we can see that there's a man kind of stepping outside his body and looking at himself and being critical of the way that he is working. So in the notes here, thinking about thinking is an important thinking skill. It includes noticing the way we learn or perform a task, knowing ourselves, not knowing what we are good at, what we need to improve, planning what we need to do to complete a task or solve a problem. And the tip there is, by watching yourself, you will become a better student. So how do we go about that? How do we get students to practice that? Well, here's one suggestion. It's a kind of discussion task for pairs or small groups. Think about a big decision you had to make recently, a new job, a new home, ending a friendship or a relationship or a marriage even. And what issues did you need to decide about? What steps did you go through before you made your decision? How could you improve your decision-making process? So this is a kind of worksheet or a prompt for a discussion between 2 or 3 people. And I've tried this out and it works very well. People start to express themselves very well, I find. So that can be used. And also there are other types of tasks like that, getting students to think about their thinking. Let's move on to the critical thinking syllabus. And here, critical thinking, well, I believe it's a bundle of skills. Like reading is not just one skill, it's a bundle of skills. And so is writing, and so is listening and speaking and study skills. So what are these sub-skills, if you like, that we could put into a syllabus? And I've organized them according to subjects like arguments and opinions. So building strong arguments, avoiding weak arguments, looking at both sides of an argument, supporting an opinion with examples, evidence, reasons, and sources. Very, very important to have these examples, evidence, reasons, and sources. Sources, of course, are important because you're saying to the reader, look, I've consulted the experts, I've looked at the findings of people who have researched this and have done experiments and so on, and this is what they found. So this is supporting my point of view. Defining terms. Very important, I think, to define the terms clearly. So if we're talking about poverty, well, what exactly do we mean by poverty? And we have to go back to a definition, maybe the United Nations definition. Poverty, or extreme poverty, they say, is an income of $2 a day or less. And through that, we clarify our own thinking. So if we're talking about, I don't know, success or unemployment or democracy or being overweight, we need a definition which will clarify our own thinking as well as helping the person we are speaking to or the reader. Data, commenting on data, asking questions about data, linking cause and effect, and showing that there can sometimes be false correlations. Just because two things happen at the same time, at the same rate, doesn't mean to say that there is a cause and effect relationship between them. Some problem solution skills, identifying a problem, finding and evaluating solutions, using criteria to make a choice. So for example, if you had to buy a new car, you might choose criteria like price, reliability, color, and so on, a safety record, and so on and so forth. And then you might want to rank those criteria, which is the most important for you. And here's some others. By the way, at the beginning, when we did this little, when I showed you this hierarchy of, or classification, this is in fact a critical thinking skill. Taking items, finding out what they have in common, and then putting them into groups and into a classification. Analyzing a process or a procedure, so an industrial process like the production of tea, or a procedure like sending a parcel to the other side of the world. If you break it down into small steps, then it becomes easier to understand and easier to explain to other people. So this is all an aspect of critical thinking, being able to do that. Distinguishing fact and opinion, very important. And then, as we mentioned earlier, thinking about thinking. So all of these elements could go into a critical thinking syllabus, these sub-skills. I'm going to show you an example of one in a textbook, my textbook as it happens. And there, that's the contents page, and there is the critical thinking component, alongside the writing skills component and the language focus. So this is a book on academic writing and critical thinking. And so all of those, a lot of those skills are included in that component. Now let's move on to classroom activities. And there are a lot of activities that we can use. And what the advantage of these activities is that they can be fitted into, they're very flexible, they can be fitted into an existing program, they can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or whatever. And they're also, generally, they're kind of fun activities, which would be probably a welcome break in the normal routine of the class. So here are some activities, puzzles, jumbled texts, which in fact are linguistic puzzles, brainstorming, and so on. Here are the skills that they are practicing. So puzzles and jumbled texts are training the brain or the linguistic brain. Brainstorming is creative thinking, thinking outside the box. Role play could be problem and solution, identifying problems and evaluating solutions. Class debates, a very good way of getting students in teams to try and work out a strong argument for their point of view. Group discussions, reflecting on a topic, and then self-reflection tasks that we've already looked at. Here are a few more: quizzes, reading texts, and the ones in blue I'm going to go through in a bit more detail in a moment. So, quizzes, they test for lazy thinking. We generally, we have these fixed ideas about the world, which we just accept without actually looking at data, and we just accept what we think we know. So a quiz is a good way of doing this, of testing for this. reading texts, distinguishing fact and opinion, and then these others, scam emails, advertisements, graphs, charts and tables, and scientific experiments. So I'll look at these now very briefly and give you some examples. Scam emails, well, the wonderful thing, I mean, scam emails, I get them all the time in my inbox, and they're very irritating, of course, and I delete. But then I suddenly started thinking, well, maybe these can be used for something, so we can actually turn them around and get some value out of them from the point of view of critical thinking. And they really are a very rich source if you look at them. So here's an example, a couple of examples. This is one that I got purporting to be from PayPal. And I put in red the things that sort of raised alarm bells. So I thought, is this really from PayPal? Dear customer, well, they've not used my name for a start. Your PayPal account, they haven't used any number or any reference to my account. Alert activity, the language sounds a bit strange there. And then we need to confirmation. Well, that's more than strange, that's incorrect. So would PayPal really send out emails with grammatical errors in? I don't know. The problem and the resolution center, I think the article is missing there. So I'm suspicious about that, and I didn't click on the links. We'll have a look in a moment at how we can exploit this, but here's another one. This is from Dr. Adrian Frost, and the company is an investment company in London. I checked this out. It is in fact a real company, and that's their address. But he puts in his private email, which is a bit strange, a Gmail email account. And then hello, well, again, a little bit strange. He doesn't seem to know me. A bit of strange language here as well. During the eastern city of Benghazi insurgencies. It sounds odd to me. And then he makes a mistake with the number, the punctuation. There should be a comma after the 300 if it's going to be 14,300,000. So you don't expect somebody working in an investment company to make mistakes like that. Again, so I need you to stand as the next of kin. Well, that's very kind, but he doesn't seem to know who I am. And I think we generally accept if something appears too good to be true, then it usually is too good to be true. And then a couple more things, strange language, fair enough. 5, capital F for a 5. Okay, so what does he want you to do? He wants me to reply to the email. Okay, and then I guess he's probably going to ask for bank account details and so on. Well, how can we exploit these? How can we turn them around to our advantage so we've got material for the classroom? Here's a very basic worksheet, which I think would apply across all scam emails. What does the sender want you to do? Click on a link, reply to an email, send your bank account details. Why are you suspicious? And then the kind of points that I've picked up in those emails. These make you suspicious. So that's a good focus for a discussion in pairs or small groups. Now, another rich source, I think, for critical thinking is advertisements. So getting students to analyze advertisements. But why particularly advertisements? Well, I think advertisements are very good because their values are the opposite of what we're trying to teach. We're trying to teach academic values, that truth is important, facts are important. It's important to be objective and not emotional when we're discussing something, and so on and so forth. Well, advertising is the opposite of all of that. Let's take some examples. We'll overlook the grammatical error here. Should be fewer wrinkles, of course. But this invites lots and lots of questions, doesn't it, when you look at this picture? So you would say, first of all, for example, well, you know, is this really the same person on the left and on the right? And when you say in minutes, how many days, how many weeks do we have to continue with this screen? And what tests have been done? So again, a worksheet which could serve for any advertisement, although you might want to do something more sophisticated, something that is specific to each advertisement. But this is general. What claim is the advertiser making? Think of 3 critical questions you could ask the advertiser. Okay, so I think it's quite obvious in that case what we could ask. Here are some more, just to get the flavor of it. So this is a cigarette advertisement, and a dentist, or somebody who's pretending to be a dentist. In fact, he's a drawing. I think we can all realize that he's a drawing and not a dentist. As your dentist, I would recommend Viceroys. So you might want to ask questions, well, why do you recommend them? What about the other negative things about cigarettes? They don't just stain your teeth, they stain your lungs. So we could ask a lot of questions on that. Here's a more recent advertisement for the battery, Duracell. It's a new Duracell. So it lasts even longer. What does that mean? Longer than what? Longer than the old batteries, longer than other batteries, other brands, and so on. Again, lots and lots of questions that we can come up with here. Okay, so let's move on to data, but I really want to skip over this because the example I've chosen here is about coronavirus, and I think we've all probably had more than enough of coronavirus. And the discussion around it. But having said that, again, it's a very rich source of critical thinking because there's so much data, so much display of data in charts and graphs and so on. It's all stuff that we can use in our critical thinking classrooms. And for example, here, countries worst hit by COVID, and it's the number of cases, 5 million in the US, I think this was back in August, and so on and so forth. We might start to question this by saying, well, this is not related to the size of the country, so it's not very meaningful, is it? For example, India, the size of India compared with the size of Chile or Spain. So, and then what do we mean by cases? A lot of questions that can arise from this. And again, here's a worksheet that can be used with almost any chart or graph. What does the data show? What possible problems are there with this data? List them below. And as I say, you know, coronavirus, if you can bear to continue discussing it again, is a rich source of data. Right, finally, coming on to scientific method, this is the method that scientists use in order to test a hypothesis. And again, this is the way that knowledge advances. So going back to the earlier example of continents, they would have used this kind of approach to find out about continents. But let's choose a simpler example. And I've done a worksheet here. So do mice grow larger if they are given vitamin C? All right. So we don't want the students to carry out this experiment, but just to think about it, think about the steps that they would go through. So first of all, gather information and observe. What would they do? Make a hypothesis, guess the answer, experiment and test the hypothesis. So what kind of experiment would they set up? Analyze your test results, present a conclusion, and so on. So here's some of the answers that they might come up with. Again, discussing in small groups. So Obviously, they would need to learn about mice and vitamin C, do a little bit of research. And then they get a hypothesis, guess the answer. So mice grow larger if they are given vitamin C. It's a possible hypothesis. I think the experiment is quite straightforward. You get two groups of mice, and one you give them a tasty diet that they wouldn't normally like, and the other you give also a tasty diet, but you add vitamin C, and you weigh them at the beginning, you weigh them at the end. And apparently, number 6 there, if you do this, then the hypothesis is not correct. In fact, vitamin C does not make them grow larger. But on the internet, you can find lots and lots of examples like this, of very simple experiments, which just you can use for students to get used to that process of going through these steps and testing their hypothesis. Right, okay, so those are the examples of these activities. Let me just conclude. Critical thinking is an important 21st century skill, perhaps one of the most important. It can be taught explicitly in the ways that I've shown, by encouraging thinking about thinking, by adding a syllabus to an academic program, and by feeding classroom activities into an existing program, a much more flexible approach. Or you can do a combination of all of these. So the question is, in an overcrowded program, you need to find space to include critical thinking, I believe, because it's important, an important skill. Just to show you the 2 books where a lot of my ideas have come from that I've written. So framework first, introducing academic writing and critical thinking, and then the higher level framework, together with teachers' guides. If you're interested in looking at these, have a look at the website, canfordpublishing.com, and there are my details as well if you need to get in touch. Thank you very much for your attention, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.